Israel has been taken by surprise on the October 7th, and it was a deception on Hamas side that they systematically worked on this plan, and at the same time they suggesting to Israel that they are now so hostile and they are ready to talk and discuss. And of course, Hamas is not the only enemy of Israel. You have, or we can say we have, because it's a common enemy and common problem. Absolutely. For Europe as well. So there are other enemies, let's say, Hezbollah and Iran. How can you make sure that they are not playing the same game with Israel? We can see that Iran is negotiating on the behalf of the hostages for foreign nationals. Nasrallah in Lebanon is making speeches sounding like that a clever statesman does. So how can you make sure that they are not working something similar, even on a larger scale, as Hamas did on October 7th?
I don't know if they are planning an attack or they are just fooling us, as you said, but I think in any case we should be vigilant and ready. I believe, we as the IDSF have seen through this and have always said that Israel must be 100% ready to any scenario. We'd never expected such a thing, of course, but we saw one thing that can be sure, that the enemy cannot be allowed to grow. Hezbollah cannot be allowed to grow to these sizes, and Iran cannot be allowed to be a nuclear threshold state. These things are not challenges you can wait and sleep through and wait another decade to resolve. Now in Hebrew we say "Habarzel cham," that the iron is hot right now. We can't wait until it cools down. Now it's an opportune moment to act. And I think, regardless of what they're planning, you can have Hezbollah playing a low-intensity game on the northern border and trying to allow Israel to understand that actually it's not interested in going to war. And then the obvious conclusion is Israel thought Hamas was not planning war either, and it was deterred either. Iran has a wide area of considerations and constraints. It is a sovereign country. If it goes on war with Israel, it is definitely risking a regime change, war with America. Obviously, like the smart analysis that I heard sometimes elsewhere in the world, they're not going to do it because they know what they risk. And I like to think, there was an Israeli official who once said, we'd like to deprive them of the dilemma. Let's not have the dilemma in the first place. They shouldn't be armed to their teeth and have the opportunity or the option even. What I think should happen after we finish the Gaza story is that say the truth to the US, say the truth to the Europeans and other responsible actors in the world, including in the region, Arab countries, that we need to finish the Hezbollah story. That would have to be a common war. And we have to tackle head-on with the Iranian threat, with Iran. I think Arab countries in the region have an interest to do it, even though we saw them cozying up in Riyadh together, shaking hands and meeting. This is all facade. I think the one thing the United States should do now is to be fully committed to the Middle East, to lead this coalition of countries, Israeli, Arab, American coalition with the support of Europe. There was an Israeli official who told me once that he talked to his American counterpart and he said, you're speaking to us, of course, we're your main strategic ally. But you have relations with Russia and you have relations with China to an extent. It doesn't work like you can't play all games. I mean, of course, your relationship with the US is something special, then you maintain some sort of reasonable relations with Russia and China. But you need to choose. And what the Israeli official said that, it's like a boy who is wooing a girl. And he loves her a lot, but she loves him as well, but she loves two other boys as well. And all he has to do in order to win her heart is simply put a ring on her finger. He simply needs to put a ring on her finger. If he doesn't, and he just keeps wooing, he's not going to be fully committed. So the US should put a ring on the finger of the Middle East to really be involved and lead the coalition of Israel, Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Jordan, Egypt, Oman, all the responsible countries against Iran and its proxies. And then, even if they really want to, they cannot attack.
And can you trust the current American government to do that commitment?
I think they can, if they want to. They have an interest to do it. They're in for election, and it looks like polls are not in their favor, to be honest. It's not my job to tell. I'm just trying to analyze their considerations. And I'm assuming leading the Middle East into an era, ushering in an era of peace through this war against the Iranian axis can look very good, to be honest. Trump gained a lot of credit for leading the Abraham Accords without firing a single shot, so without relinquishing 1 centimeter from Israeli territory. I think it's possible.
President Biden said that one of the reasons behind the attack of Hamas was that they were afraid of the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Is that right?
I think there's a lot of truth in it. I can't tell you that Iran ordered Hamas to invade on October 7th. That I cannot tell you. But I can tell you that they have been funding and training and equipping them for exactly this scenario. It's possible that Hamas acted on its own decision, but the plans were there, and they were Iranian plans. How to invade in a very corroborated way, to send 100 drones at once and drop grenades and neutralize all the cameras and fire anti-tank missiles, and then drop IEDs that were pre-laid on the fence in order to breach it out, and have tractors, and then have vans, and then fire with light ammunition, and all of it, and fire 2,000 rockets all at the same time. This is an Iranian plan, plain and simple, to document everything, to live stream everything. This is an Iranian plan. This Iranian money, this Iranian armament. IDF soldiers found Iranian weapons in Israeli kibbutzim, for sure. The question is, I think Iran for sure wanted to prevent this coalition that I was mentioning from forming. So Netanyahu and MBS, Biden, they were all in the United Nations, gloating with, just promising us the Middle East peace in just a matter of months. And Iran sees this and is terrified. And the Iranian leader told Arab countries, don't bet on the loose horse. You don't want to, this is a complete betrayal of Islam if you do it. And precisely what he said about the UAE and Bahrain and all that. And I think he wanted to prevent that. And Iran is known as a state sponsor of terrorism that has no equivocation and has no restraints. If it orchestrates terror plots inside the European soil and on American soil, and kills U.S. troops in Afghanistan and Iraq and in Syria while negotiating with the U.S., so it really has no boundaries. I speak Farsi, I learn their language, I read their media, I know how they think. This is precisely the very wise Iranian mind that wants to play all games and does not let anyone undermine their territory, and I think this is what they're trying to do.
And what is the Iranian calculus with the nuclear program? We can hear about it for more than decades, maybe decades. I remember Prime Minister Netanyahu making a very strong speech at the UN several years ago, showing the ticking bomb, and we could hear different estimates how close they are to making the bomb. What is the reality? They are working so slow, or they are deliberately nearing it step by step without stepping over the red line. What is the situation
right now? And I can tell you, as someone who analyzed the Iranian nuclear program for some years now, Iran is a nuclear threshold state right now. It's a fact. Iran holds enough enriched uranium, fissile material, in order to create up to 5 nuclear weapons if it so chooses. So the IAEA even says it, not just myself. The IAEA says it's a matter of decision, not capability, that it can break through to a bomb within 2 to 3 weeks, the first nuclear device. enough fissile material, not the bomb itself. Still, I'm not sure about the composition of the bomb itself, the fuse, putting it on a warhead, on a missile. It all takes a lot of time and technology. But uranium, it's a heartbeat away, and that's what they call a zero breakout time. So technically, it's already there. It's completely unacceptable, and I think this is precisely the challenge that I'm talking about. That Israel cannot allow to keep, warming up, because we trusted the intelligence to give us the warning about Gaza, and the intelligence didn't bring the warning. How do we know? Well, the cover of Iran is pretty good, let me tell you. How can we trust intelligence to know that Iran decided or not decided to break to a bomb? So you don't want, as I said, you don't want to take the risk. You don't want to deprive them from a dilemma. You don't want them to have the dilemma in the first place. So Iran not only installed new centrifuge cascades, IR6, IR9, even it's experimenting. It is also enriching far more uranium than before, almost to weapon grade, banishing investigators and taking down security cameras, and digging down new underground facilities in Natanz, Fotó, under a mountain where it's very hard to bomb from the air. Not impossible, but harder. And so I think it's in a very, very crucial crossroads where you have to decide if we'll let this threat remain, even evolve, or we confront it head on. So we know the price of action, which is war with Iran. It's not a good thing. But what is the price of inaction? Nobody poses that question. The price of inaction, in my opinion, is far worse. That means a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. That means that Israel is under a constant threat of nuclear annihilation by these ayatollahs. That means that if Israel wants to strike in Syria or in Iraq or elsewhere, Iran says, if you dare to do it, you have a business with us. So it really holds back Israel's military supremacy in the Middle East. It's a bad idea, not just for Israel, but also for the Middle East, for Europe, in terms of migration waves, in terms of the security of Europe itself, with long-range ballistic missiles that already reach Eastern Europe right now, that Iran holds. At the end of the day, the US and the region will have to make a decision, and I think they have to act.
And what about Iran's other proxies, like the Houthis in Yemen? Do they present, how big a danger do they present? We could see that they are trying to shoot drones and rockets to Israel.
It's a hassle. I don't think it's a threat right now, but it's certainly they're trying to divert Israel's attention from the war, not very successfully, but they're trying to. It shouldn't be taken for granted, though, that Israel can intercept these missiles, once with F-35, once with Arrow 3 that was tested for the first time successfully, one with USS Carney in the Red Sea that intercepted these missiles and drones. So, and even for the first time, a Saudi missile intercepted one of these cruise missiles. So this could be an intersection of interest between Israel and Saudi Arabia to fight Iranian terrorism, to fight Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis together. This could very well be a Saudi interest if only the US puts that ring, right? And yeah, I think you needn't look no further than their logo, the Houthis. Very not graphically articulated the logo, but it says in green, red, and white, it says Allahu Akbar, God is Almighty, Al-Maut li-Amerika, death to America, Al-Maut li-Israel, death to Israel, La'anat lil-Yahud, curse be the Jews, Nasr li-Islam, victory to Islam. So if this is this I believe that they hold, I think that everyone should view them as a common threat.
If you take a look at Europe, there's a war going on for almost 2 years in Europe. And there are quite a number of people who want to suggest that it's in the interest of Russia to create havoc in the Middle East in order to have a free hand in the Ukraine and lessening the Western support for Ukraine. Do you see any realistic reason behind this logic, or this is two completely different things?
I think the Russia story is interesting. We also issued a policy paper about it. My hunch is that Russia would not, and it's an educated one, I think, that Russia would not react the same way 2 years ago. And because of the Ukrainian invasion, and because the whole Western world is united against it and sanctions and all that, it is becoming more violent, sort of pushed to the corner, pushed to the wall, and becoming a full part of the Iranian-Russian-China axis that is now increasingly forming. And had it been for the Ukrainian invasion and all the West's reaction and the Russian completely aggressive and unacceptable invasion of Ukraine, I think we wouldn't see that kind of cold reaction from Russia. It would probably be more friendly to Israel. We saw how Putin and Netanyahu were quite close friends. We saw how Russia helped Israel not only have freedom of operation around the skies of Syria, but also holding back S-300, S-400 air defense systems from Syria and from Iran itself. And we saw how these very delicate relations form. Russia helped find the remains of an Israeli soldier who fell 50 years ago. But I think now Russia has picked sides, and Israel finds itself, I think, in a problem because it has been very, very careful not to criticize Russia, not because it supports what it does in Ukraine, because it wants to maintain some sort of reasonable relations with it. But now I think Israel is also pushed to the corner where he says, okay, this is a crisis. This might be also an opportunity to rally the US and Europe, who already have this big belly of complaints toward Russia, coming to the vacuum in the Middle East and taking Russia's place and offering this ring to Arab countries and to Israel and to form this coalition. Otherwise, Saudi Arabia can very well go to Russia's help. Egypt is already buying mass amounts of ammunition and weapons from Russia. So I think this is the West's place to intervene.
But Israel and Russia cooperated in many ways, for example, in Syria, and it is still very important for Israel. So does that kind of cooperation still exist?
It still exists. But as I mentioned, I think it's going to be far more complicated right now to, in Hebrew we say, dance in both weddings at the same time, you know? Eat your cake and have it, and have it. It's not easy. You want to criticize Russia for inviting over Musa Abu Marzouk and Bassem Naim from Hamas over to the Russian Foreign Ministry in Moscow. And it has sort of called the Russian ambassador for a talk and all that. In the end of the day, we're not going to break all relations with Russia. Israel is not a country that acts from the stomach. That's from the mind mostly. And it wouldn't be wise, just strategically, to fight with Russia right now. Is it ugly? Is it not pleasant? Of course. The question is, what are Israel's interests? And right now, we have an interest to keep Russia away from Syria and Iran. Not very successfully recently, but if we break all the relations, I think it would be even push Russia even further away to cozy up to Iran and Syria. And I think this is something that Israel doesn't want to see.
You've been talking about the reactions and the pro-Palestinian demonstrations in Europe and about the positive examples as well. We could see, for example, this week in the Netherlands that the party of Geert Wilders won the election. But I could, with a very strong and with strong program and message, critical of immigration, critical of Islam. But I could read some mixed reactions in the Israeli media that lamenting that how good it is for us. Is it good for us to have such a possible prime minister in the Netherlands? And there are also other examples when right-wing European politicians have the message of pro-Israeli, philo-Semitic, and critical of the jihadist movement. And I have to tell you, I know Gerd Wilders personally. I've translated his book and met him and translated for him on his book tour in Hungary a couple of years ago. So I had the personal impression that he's not an extremist, and he's a very open-minded liberal. He's an agnostic. He doesn't call himself a Christian. Mm-hmm. So how do you see that? How can be a stronger trust created between Israel and these right-wing European friends? And sometimes I also read the same reaction about our prime minister in the Israeli press. That well, okay, he's pro-Israeli, but we know that in deep inside he tends to be anti-Semitic or something like that, or surrounded by that group of people. So how could that trust and alliance be strengthened?
I think the same way it went with Austria and with Czech Republic and with Hungary and with Poland in ups and downs, but still. With Italy's Meloni, look no further than these examples, because I think even in Greece, to some extent, Cyprus, at the end of the day, I want to be very careful, because I don't want to intervene in what Europeans elected, don't elect. This is really their business. And it's not my place to say, if you choose Wilders over other candidates, Rote, whatever, it's not my business. I'm just noting that conservative governments around Europe, in the UK, Rishi Sunak, in Austria, even from Kurz's time and on to the present one, in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, in many other countries, in Italy's Meloni, and all of these countries, tend to be far, far, far more friendly to Israel. This is just an observation that I have. I think they understand the common threat that you mentioned, that extremist Islam is a common threat to both Israel and Europe. I don't think they should combat Islam as a religion or Muslims in general, but they do understand that the terrorist organizations, extremists who preach on the streets and have mass protests on the streets, it's not something they want to see in their countries. And I think it would be quite easy, to be honest. And let me just say, don't think that what you read or hear in the Israeli media necessarily represents what most of the Israeli public thinks. I think it's quite a familiar experience to many people. I mean, there are mixed reactions everywhere, but in general, I think that relations couldn't be better with these countries that elected the conservative leaders. And it's not coincidence that the only countries who voted for Israel in the United Nations were Hungary, Austria, Czech Republic. These were really, the UK has its history and its issues, even though it's very, very supportive of Israel. I think it's quite easy and at reach if only they begin with the right conclusion. It's a common threat. Israel is defending itself and not woke up one shiny morning and decided to commit genocide in Palestinians. It's a ridiculous presupposition. And at the end of the day, feeding a hungry lion does not help. And appeasing Iran and appeasing extremist Islam does not help. If you want to gain the support of the Arab world, pragmatic Muslims, of Israel, of course, need to start by defining the problem, call it a spade, and I think the rest is pretty easy. You just have to start there. And I think Hungary is doing it very well and magnificently well, but I would like to see more countries in Europe simply reach that simple conclusion.
Hopefully we will see.
Yeah.